Alright, really excited about this video. This one in particular because I think it'll answer a lot of questions like, what is that? What app is that? Why are you doing that? We'll cover all bases, which is data tracking and how assessing all these different variables is going to have a positive impact on your recovery, your health, your sleep. We've got 4 areas we'll be looking at that are all impacted by the type of quality sleep that you'll get. So the first is blood glucose, blood pressure, heart rate, HRV, which is heart rate variability, your sleep cycle, and what appliances that we can use to track these, or what supplements can we use that can help assist any of these issues we may be having. So again, we know that every major physiological system within the body and every single operation and process of the brain is going to be enhanced by sleep when we get it, and it's drastically impaired when we don't get enough. So keep that in mind as we go through some of these tracking sources. So we will start with blood glucose, because it's an area you'll see me share sometimes in the morning on my Instagram story. Take a little picture of the reading. I feel as a fitness industry that we've transitioned from, oh, I can bench more than you, to, well, my blood glucose is lower than yours, or I've slept better than you, which I think is a really progressive direction that we're going in. So glucose regulation becomes impaired after a short night's sleep. When you eat a meal, you have a spike in blood sugar, and it can be dangerous if it stays high for a long time. It's not optimal to have high levels of circulating glucose, and normally what happens is your pancreas and beta cells will sense and listen for that glucose, and when they pick up that glucose signal, they release insulin, and that will lower the blood sugar. But those beta cells become muted in terms of their sort of listening capacity for glucose, and they stop releasing insulin. And so you actually become pre-diabetic after just 1 week of short night's sleep, roughly 4 hours a night. Your blood sugar levels are so disrupted that your doctor would classify you basically being a pre-diabetic. So glucose tolerance is huge with sleep quality. When should we be assessing and taking our blood glucose? I recommend first thing in the morning, so after roughly an 8 to 12 hour fast, for example, and what I call your post-workout meal. So to see what situation you're going into your next meal after you've had your post-workout meal. And generally, this will only apply to off-season clients or those in a high-calorie phase. Usually after a training session, your post-workout glucose is quite low due to the, intense bout of exercise that you've just had. So in terms of your ranges and what we're looking for upon wake after that fast, anywhere between 70 to 100 according to this graph. I like, personally, for me, I would want to wake up in the 75 to 85 range, and then post-workout, after my post-workout meal, nothing more than 100. I try to keep it under that. Again, that's just for me. But again, this graph is here for just some guidance on some ranges. What is a sign, or what would you do if your blood glucose is higher than the given ranges, for example? Again, this goes back to what we talked about, having poor sleep. It could be an indication you had a bad night's rest. It could also be an indication that you're stressed, so elevated cortisol. And it could also mean that you're becoming resistant to insulin and you're not really partitioning those carbohydrates very well. So what can you do to lower that in the morning? So if you wake up to a high reading, I would then recommend having some water with some apple cider vinegar and a little pinch of salt. That additional salt in the water will help get rid and disperse some of the carbohydrates that are sort of just hanging around from the day before. So generally, if it's too much of a drop, then that's a indication of dehydration. So making sure that your reading doesn't go from 100 down to 70, making sure that you get adequate amount of water on that day leading up to the time when you go to bed is key. So that is everything I wanted to chat about with blood glucose. We're looking for a healthy range there. And in terms of appliances, you can get any of those blood glucose readings at any pharmacy. They're fairly cheap and not too expensive. So on to the next one, which is right over here on this graph for blood pressure, which is generally pretty straightforward. The lower the better. I've gotten my blood pressure at home reading from OnRum. I'll show you a picture of that later in the slide at the end. And we know that deep sleep does many of the body's operational benefits. So it's basically going to recalibrate your cardiovascular system, and it is by far one of the best forms of natural blood pressure medication that you could ever wish for. So in terms of blood pressure readings, a normal reading, systolic less than 120, diastolic less than 80. Mine most mornings is like 112, 114 over 70. And we can go into a lot more on blood pressure in a separate video. If that's something that you all would like, please let me know. There's so much to try to cram into this video alone, and we can put that into a video down the road, and we can look into improving lipids, decreasing blood pressure. So you can see here on the graph, hypertension stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. Obviously, anything higher than that, definitely want to go straight to the hospital. And in terms of a heart rate, variability and heart rate itself, resting heart rate anywhere from 60 to 75. Most people are healthy with elevated heart rates, and mine is typically less than 60. Potentially, if you do have that, you may be suffering from bradycardia. What you could do is go to your doctor, ask for an echocardiogram, and I did that. They scanned my heart. All the valves are fine. Generally, the lower the heart rate, it's a good sign that you're healthy. So we've got blood glucose, blood pressure, heart rate, and now if you look over here, we're going to cover heart rate variability. This is the time between each beat, and what this is if you've got a high heart rate variability, you're more in the parasympathetic range. So this is what promotes recovery, a relaxed state. If you have a low HRV, this is typically a sign that you're in the sympathetic reading, which shows you're stressed, and it could potentially be, a sign of inflammation, poor recovery, poor sleep. You see how this all ties into adequate sleep and sleep quality. So in order to track your HRV, you'll need a Polar HR10 or an Oura ring, and you can get the Polar on Amazon for less than about $100. What you'll do is you'll attach it to your chest in the morning. You'll open up the app. You'll need to download Elite HRV, and that'll give you your reading. Generally, what we're aiming for on the relative balance is sort of like right in the middle and not too far one way or the other. You don't want to be too low on the sympathetic readings. It may be time to look at possibly taking a deload. It may mean, pulling back on intensity in your training sessions, but it's generally a sign of poor recovery from poor sleep if you're on the lower end of HRV. So you'll need the HRV Elite app and a Polar H10 or an Oura ring. These are all really good for training if you're wanting to assess your heart rate throughout the session, if you want to track how far you ran or cycled, for example. Those are all really good. Highly recommend you get one. But you can see how these are all, like I mentioned, correlated with the quality of sleep. So finally, we'll go into sleep. We've looked at these pictures before, but what we can see when we track our sleep is how long it takes us to get to bed, which could be a sign of decreased serotonin, how long are we awake for? If we are awake for long bouts of the night, it could potentially be a sign of melatonin deficiency, and our sleep cycle itself. So going from REM to NREM 1, NREM 2, NREM stages 3 and 4, deep sleep, and then we can assess how long we are in those cycles. So again, the sleep cycle review is in episode 1. Be sure to check back on that if you haven't seen it already. And then how do we track our sleep? So a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or the Oura Ring, most of us have one of those 3 pieces of technology because we like to track our steps or log our activity or our cardio sessions, but they can also track sleep as well. So I know on the Fitbit app, when it says how have you slept, the top right hand corner is a plus sign, and you can track your sleep, and that will indicate how long it's taken you to get to bed, and how long you are or how long you have been awake through the night. You can also download an app called Sleep Cycle, and this also records from your phone, so it's not a wearable, but it can record snoring or disturbances through the night. Generally, I like to use the Oura Ring or the Apple Watch, and in the morning, I'll just take it off and let it charge while I'm getting ready for the day. You can use the Polar HR10 when you're sleeping, but I don't find it to be very comfortable wearing around your body while you're sleeping. So the Apple Watch or Ring, Fitbit, or using the app Sleep Cycle on your phone or Sleep Watch, those are really, really good. So moving on to sleep supplements. Now, this is based off of the Why We Sleep book and Dr. Matt Walker, and his approach with all of this is not typically being a fan of all of the current sleep supplements that are out there, either old or new, just simply because most do not produce a naturalistic sleep. And there's a lot of buzz out there now. Obviously, CBD, ashwagandha, those are all high on market now, and especially social media. But what they're called essentially by Matt is sedative hypnotics. And sedation is not sleep. So all you're actually doing when you take things that are in a supplement form is knocking out your cortex. There's continued research and literature on these trending supplements, but this is kind of what I would consider as being a last resort move, in my opinion. Our goal is not to rely on an outside source or supplement or chemical to get quality sleep. We can increase our sleep score or increase our sleep quality if we're willing to do some of the things that we've mentioned in episode 2 about the sleep tips, and also through Matt's book. He goes through a ton of information in that. And so what can we do naturally? Well, first off, we can block out the light. So our phones, our laptops, TVs, even headlights emit blue light, and just regular light bulbs. So this can suppress the release of melatonin, which is the hormone that regulates sleep. So if we have low levels of melatonin, we can expect poor sleep. So the moral of the story, turn night mode on your phone, or get a pair of blue light blocking glasses from Amazon, and ideally you'd like to get rid of any use of screen time, roughly 30-45 minutes before bed. Read a book, listen to a podcast, just wind down. You can also use lavender spray on your pillow. That's been shown to increase the slow wave sleep, which is going to be instrumental for slowing your heartbeat, relaxing your muscles a little bit. Nasal strips for people that snore. This is going to stretch out your nostrils while you sleep just to help promote better breathing and, relieve snoring from happening. And our environment itself, so our bedroom, making it quiet, making it black, making it dark, making sure that we have the room cold. Again, all these tips can be found on episode 2, as well as the Why We Sleep book. So make sure you check those out. And there are all the appliances that we've talked about. So here we have our blood pressure from Omron. We have our blood glucose that you can get basically from any pharmaceutical place around, CVS, Walgreens, for example. We talked about the ranges that we want to go into. Our Aura ring is going to give us a lot of sleep information. That is the most expensive out of them all. We can track a lot through our Fitbit as well as our Apple Watch and phone apps like Sleep Cycle, the Polar HR10. We can track our heart rate variability through the Elite HRV app. So these are all things that will help us with our sleep quality. If you have any questions whatsoever about any of these areas, please head over to the Facebook page or contact me directly. I hope all of this has made some sense, and I hope that it's made you all very aware of how important sleep is, and hopefully it's cleared up a few of your questions that you've had. But I hope you have a new outlook on sleep and why we assess our blood glucose, why we look at blood pressure, why we look at our HRV, and why assessing your sleep is so important. So if you have any topics that you'd like to see covered in the next series of videos from me and the rest of the team, please let us know. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you and good night. Much love.